plain sight as an exhibit was probably the most involved thing that's been done in the cemetery in quite a long time. As an organization, the Friends of Geer Cemetery, while sort of building on what people who have had relatives and now ancestors buried there have been doing, which is just trying to imbue the space with the dignity that they would want to see given to their deceased ancestors. And there's been a lot of great cleanup work, some of which the city has now gotten involved in. But hundreds of people came out to the cemetery over a concentrated period of weeks. A lot of people did a lot of reading, a lot of learning, a lot of thinking.
We don't know exactly the first burial, but we know that 3 African-American men purchased land in 1877, and then it sort of fell out of use in the middle of the 20th century. But really, the end date we give it is 1944. The biggest problem when it comes to data is that a lot of the monuments don't exist anymore. Also, death certificates for Durham, North Carolina weren't required or available until September 1909. So anyone who was buried prior to that, the only data that we have that's solid comes from the tombstones, a handful of information from a Works Progress Administration survey.
Some people we have really rich sources like diaries. Other people we have nothing, not even a death certificate. You know, kids who died before their first birthday, who were someone's kids, and they matter very much.
After 1909, pretty solid data. Before that, not so much. Traditional historians in general tend to be a little bit wary of data, especially when they know it's not complete. Having some data is better than no data, because at least we can say we know with confidence what's going on after 1909, and also highlight for visitors what we really don't know.
I think the most important thing that this exhibit accomplishes is visibility. You know, that people understand that this is not just a space you pass by. This is a space that is imbued with a lot of history and a lot of meaning. To sort of say that Black history isn't something that happens, you know, out there. It's also something that has been created by people who are from right here. African Americans have been part of our community since it was founded, and that a huge portion of that history is sort of archived in this space, and we ought to take care of it. There has basically, as long as there has been a Durham, been a vibrant African American community, but the dynamic between that community and access to all sorts of advantages has varied greatly and continues to this day. So issues of injustice that come up in this exhibit are still part of the world that we live in, whether we like it or not.
Especially when we're talking about marginalized populations for, racial, ethnic, religious, any of those categories, people tend to think, well, if we're talking about data, we're just turning people into data points. We're further dehumanizing people that were already in their time treated as objects or just marginalized subjects in general. I think that's true for a lot of data sets. So one of the things that I'm working on is how can we ethically present data, especially when we're talking about people who have traditionally not been given the representation that they need. That's why in undertaking this project, what I really wanted to do was have a database where people could look up a specific name, see the person that they're interested in and details about them, but also have this sort of larger data set that we could use to study a community in an aggregate form, trying to show that each of these points are people. You don't want to just have a bar graph with generalized data on it where you're not able to explore who the people who are buried there actually were.
You know, you have educators, you have religious leaders, you have entrepreneurs and business leaders, you have everyday workers, you have parents, you have students.
To be able to zoom in and say, they're not just data points, these are individuals and they had individual lives and individual histories that are also worth reclaiming with the cemetery.
You know, we just absolutely could not have done this exhibit without not just the cooperation or agreement, but really the intense engagement of a group of descendants of people buried in Geer Cemetery. People shared family photographs, people interviewed via Zoom, people came to the cemetery and interviewed in person. People dug through their old records, family Bibles and papers and valuable materials, understanding that these would be shared publicly and really encouraging that it be done. That was a really inspiring experience. The number of people that we were in touch with were descendants multiplied several fold in this process. And A lot of them have become friends. It's been a really great experience.